Hi, this is Julie Harland, and I'm your Math Gal. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com, where you could search for any of my videos organized by topic. This is Angles Part 3, and we do these 3 problems on this video, and we also define vertical angles. All right, we're just going to continue working a few more problems where we have to find the measures of angles. So how about putting the video on pause and trying this one on your own first if you can? Find the measure of angle x. So you have to look at the picture and figure out how you could find out the measure of angle x according to this picture. All right, so let's try it. Well, altogether, this is a full revolution. All these angles you see here, I didn't draw the little angle mark, but you could do that. It gets a little confusing, but you could have all these angles in here. I've got 4 angles, and together it makes a full revolution, so they must add up to 360 degrees. So let's all add all the angles up. One angle is x. The next angle is 2x. The next angle is 4x. The next angle is 3x. And altogether that adds up to 360 degrees. All right, so now we have an equation. We could add like terms on the left. That will be 10x equals 360. I could leave off the degree symbol and deal with that later when I write my answer. And so we divide by 10. So it looks like x is 36. And that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for x. Find the measure of angle x. So it looks like this is our answer, 36 degrees. But it would be a good idea to check your answer and see if we put that in for all the x's here, and we got all the angles to make sure it really does add up to 360 degrees. So let's check it. If x is 36, what would 2x be? That'd be 72 degrees. What would 3x be? Would you have to do 3 times 36? So that's 108 degrees. What would 4x be? Well, that'd be 4 times 36, or 144 degrees. Okay, so if we add all these up, what do we get? So 16, 20, carry the 2, 12, 13, 14, 18, whoops, 6. There we go. And 360, it does add up to 360 degrees, so it looks like this is the correct answer. So what we're looking for is 36 degrees. If the problem would have stated, state the measures of all 4 angles, our answer would be 36 degrees, 72 degrees, 108 degrees, and 144 degrees. All right, here's the next problem. Find the measure of angle x. So these are just 2 intersecting lines. They intersect. So look at the picture and see if you can figure out how to get the measure of angle x. Okay, if this is just a straight line here, even though I didn't draw it that straight, then these 2 angles are supplements, right? So they have to add up to 180. So that's all we do here. X plus 112. Oops, I'm going to leave off the degree. Equals 180. Subtract 112. And that gives you 68. So what we're looking for is the measure of angle x, and that would then be just 68 degrees. That's our answer. And we can check that 112 plus 68 does add up to 180 degrees. Now, this is an interesting problem to look at. What would this angle over here be? Okay, this one right here. Well, this forms a straight line too, right? If you look at these 2 angles together. So we have x plus 112 is 180, and we have this other thing over here plus 112 equals 180 as well. So that means this is also 68 degrees. Remember we had that x was 68 degrees? And since these 2 also have to add up to 180, then this is also 68 degrees. Well, this is an interesting property here. So if you have two intersecting lines, these two angles right here are the same. These are called vertical angles. And they are equal. Okay, so if you have two lines formed, these two angles, and look at it, they do look like they should be the same, right? And then, by the same logic, these two angles here are the same. So I'll call those Y and Y. So if you have two intersecting lines, these angles right here, kind of across from each other, they're called vertical angles, are equal. And the other two sets of vertical angles are equal. And what else do you know about x plus y? X plus y, well, each of those, whether you look at this x plus y or this x plus y or this x plus y or this x plus y, they keep forming a straight angle, so they're all going to add up to 180 degrees. What we could say here is that x and y, these are adjacent angles because they're next to each other of intersecting lines. Okay, so we have intersecting lines. These are two adjacent angles. And what we just found out is that adjacent angles of intersecting lines are supplementary angles because they add up to 180. So we could write that down. All right, so these are the two things we just learned. Vertical angles have the same measure, and adjacent angles of intersecting lines are supplementary angles because the two angles add up to 180 degrees, right? One other thing to notice here, if you intersect two lines like this, two of the angles will be acute, right? These two vertical angles, like x, that's an acute angle, and the other angle will be the obtuse angle. That happens unless they are perpendicular lines like this. So if they're perpendicular, 90 degrees, then all the angles will be exactly 90 degrees. Otherwise, two angles will be acute, less than 90, and the other two will be obtuse, somewhere between 90 and 180 degrees. All right, so now that we have that down, find x. These are two intersecting lines. How would you figure out what x is? Try it on your own by putting the video on pause. Okay, so let's see. Well, what do we know about each of these angles? They are, they're both the vertical angles here, so they're equal to each other. So that's all we do. We know that 5x minus 22 is the same thing as 3x. So let's write that down. So this angle over here is the same as that angle over there. Now remember, if they were two adjacent angles, they would add up to 180, right? We just did a problem like that, but that's not this problem. These are the same measure here. So how do we solve this? How about subtracting 3x from both sides? And let's go ahead and also add 22 to both sides. So we have our variables on the left, constants on the right. So we've got 2x equals 22. So x is 11 degrees. Now, that's not the measure of the angle, right? That's just what x stands for. What's the measure of the acute angle? It shouldn't matter which one you put it into, but that's how we would check it. We would make sure it works in both of them. So if I put an 11 for x, 3x is one of those acute angles, is 3 times 11 degrees, which is 33 degrees. And how about 5x minus 22? Well, that's 5 times 11 minus 22 is going to be 55 minus 22. Also 33 degrees. So it does check out. It does make sense, hopefully, to you. Lastly, what if I asked what the measure of the obtuse angle is? In other words, what if I called this y and I said find y? How would you figure out what this angle is? Well, now that's adjacent to the 3x. These two angles add up to 180. And can you do that one? How would I find y? Hopefully you've done it. You're just going to do 180 minus 33. Okay, because the two angles have to add up. 147 degrees. Okay. Now, of course, if you wanted to write an equation, you could write y plus 33, right? Equals 180. And of course, the next step would be to subtract 33 from both sides and get 147 degrees. So 147 degrees happens to be the obtuse angle. The question, though, just asked you to find x, so here is what was asked. That was what the problem originally asked for. But we could find out all this other information as well. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com where you can view all of my videos, which are organized by topic.